On the night of the 11th of October 1969, a taxi slowly pulled over to the curb in downtown San Francisco. Its driver, Paul Stine, had no reason to believe this passenger would become one of the most infamous killers in American history. Moments later, a single gunshot echoed through the quiet street. The passenger calmly stepped out of the cab. He wiped the taxi clean. Then, before disappearing into the darkness, he tore away a piece of the driver's blood-stained shirt as proof. But the murder itself wasn't what terrified America. It was what happened next. Days later, newspapers across California received a letter. Inside was that exact piece of Paul Stine's shirt. The writer claimed responsibility for the murder. Then he signed the letter with a strange symbol, a circle, crossed by a single line. From that moment on, the killer gave himself a name, Zodiac. Over the next several years, he taunted police with cryptic letters, ciphers, and chilling threats. He claimed to have murdered dozens of people. He challenged the FBI. He mocked detectives. And he seemed to enjoy watching an entire nation desperately try to catch him. Thousands of suspects were investigated. Millions of dollars were spent. Some of America's greatest detectives devoted years of their lives to the case. Yet, despite decades of investigations, no one has ever been convicted. No one knows for certain who Zodiac really was. So how did one man manage to outsmart police, the FBI, and the world's most advanced forensic investigators, while leaving behind one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in criminal history? This is the hunt for the Zodiac Killer. Long before the name Zodiac appeared in newspaper headlines, the killings had already begun. On the evening of the 20th of December 1968, two teenagers parked their car on a quiet gravel road near Lake Herman Road, just outside the small town of Benicia, California. The couple, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, had come there for a simple reason. Like countless young couples before them, they wanted a little privacy before Christmas. The road was isolated. There were no houses nearby. Very few cars passed after dark. To them, it felt safe. At approximately 11:15 p.m., another vehicle pulled in behind them. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Perhaps another couple had arrived. Perhaps someone needed directions. No one knows exactly what happened during the next few moments. Investigators believe the driver stepped out of the vehicle and approached the teenager's car. Then, without warning, gunfire erupted. David was shot at close range while still inside the car. Betty managed to escape. She ran desperately into the darkness, covering nearly 30 feet before multiple bullets struck her from behind. She never made it. The killer walked away, without taking money, without stealing the car, without speaking to witnesses. There was no apparent motive. When police arrived, they found little evidence beyond shell casings and the bodies of the young couple. The murders shocked the local community, but detectives initially treated them as an isolated crime. Perhaps it was a jealous lover. Perhaps a robbery gone wrong. Perhaps someone with a personal grudge. No one imagined that this lonely stretch of road would become the opening chapter of one of America's greatest criminal mysteries. For months, the investigation produced almost nothing. No fingerprints, no reliable witnesses, no clear suspect. As public attention slowly faded, investigators hoped the killer had disappeared forever. But 6 months later, on another quiet lover's lane, history would repeat itself. Only this time, one victim would survive, and his testimony would introduce the world to a killer unlike any America had ever seen. 6 months passed. The murders at Lake Herman Road remained unsolved. No arrests, no meaningful leads. To most investigators, the case had already begun to grow cold. Then, on the night of the 4th of July, 1969, history repeated itself. Just after midnight, 22-year-old Darlene Farron drove to Blue Rock Springs Park, only a few miles from the site of the first murders. Beside her sat Mike Mageau, a 19-year-old friend. The parking lot was nearly empty. The two talked quietly inside the car while fireworks from Independence Day celebrations echoed faintly in the distance. Then another vehicle slowly entered the parking lot. Its headlights pointed directly at them. The driver stopped for a moment. Then, without saying a word, he drove away. Mike relaxed. Perhaps it had been a police officer checking the area. Perhaps someone had simply taken a wrong turn. But only a few minutes later, the same car returned. This time, it stopped directly behind them. The driver stepped out. Mike noticed a flashlight approaching through the darkness. At first, he assumed it was a police officer. Instead, the stranger suddenly raised a handgun. Without warning, he opened fire through the passenger side window. Bullets shattered the glass. Mike screamed in pain as multiple rounds struck his body. Darlene slumped over the steering wheel. Believing both victims were already dead, the gunman calmly turned away and began walking back toward his car. Then he heard movement behind him. Mike was still alive. The stranger quietly returned. He fired several more shots into both victims, then disappeared into the darkness. Miraculously, Mike survived, barely conscious. He later described the attacker as a heavy-set white man with a broad face, short hair, and an emotionless expression. It was the first real description investigators had ever received, but the most chilling moment came less than an hour later. At 12:40 a.m., the Vallejo Police Department received a phone call. The caller spoke calmly. "I want to report a double murder." He gave the exact location of the shooting. Then he added something no one expected. "I also killed those kids last Christmas." The line went dead. For the first time, police knew the two attacks were connected. They weren't hunting two different killers. They were hunting one man. A man who wasn't afraid to call the police himself. If you had been investigating this case in 1969, would you have believed the anonymous caller immediately, or assumed it was just another false confession? Let me know what you think in the comments. By the end of 1969, the Zodiac Killer had become more than a murderer. He had become a public spectacle. Every new letter dominated newspaper headlines. Every cipher sparked nationwide curiosity. Every threat forced police departments to ask the same question. Was he bluffing, or was he preparing to kill again? The Zodiac seemed to understand something long before social media ever existed. Fear spread faster than violence. A single letter could terrify millions of people more effectively than a single murder. In one chilling message, he claimed that shooting victims had become too easy. He suggested that his next attacks would target school buses. He described a horrifying plan to shoot out a bus tire before picking off children as they climbed out. Whether he ever intended to carry out the threat remains unknown, but authorities couldn't afford to ignore it. Police patrols around schools increased almost overnight. School bus routes were quietly reviewed. Parents began driving their children to school instead of letting them ride alone. Across Northern California, fear became part of everyday life. Yet while the public searched for a monster hiding in the shadows, investigators were searching for something much smaller, a mistake. Every Zodiac letter became a piece of evidence. Experts examined handwriting, paper fibers, envelope glue, ink composition, fingerprints, even microscopic traces that might reveal where the letters had been prepared. The FBI joined local investigators, attempting to compare the ciphers with military encryption systems and known criminal codes, but the results were frustrating. Some messages were solved, others remain undeciphered even today. The famous 340-character cipher, mailed in November 1969, resisted every attempt to crack it. For more than 50 years, professional cryptographers, intelligence analysts, university professors, and amateur codebreakers all failed. The cipher became almost as famous as the killer himself. Then, in 2020, an international team of civilian codebreakers finally decoded it using a combination of mathematical analysis and computer algorithms. Many expected the message to reveal Zodiac's true identity. Instead, it revealed something even more disturbing. The cipher mocked investigators once again. It denied that a television caller claiming to be Zodiac was actually him. It laughed at the idea of fearing execution, and it repeated the bizarre belief that killing people would somehow provide slaves for him in the afterlife. There was no confession, no address, no hidden name, no final clue. Just another reminder that the Zodiac had been playing a psychological game from the very beginning. He didn't simply want to escape justice. He wanted the world to keep searching, and decades later, it still is. There's the years passed. Investigators accumulated thousands of pages of reports. Every new tip seemed promising. Every suspect appeared to fit at least part of the profile. And every time detectives thought they were getting closer, the trail disappeared. No suspect attracted more attention than Arthur Lee Allen. A former elementary school teacher, Allen lived in Northern California and had a troubling history. Friends later claimed he had spoken about hunting people before the Zodiac murders became public. He reportedly owned weapons similar to those used in the attacks. One acquaintance even told police that Allen had once mentioned wanting to call himself Zodiac and use a flashlight attached to a gun to hunt couples at night. To investigators, the similarities were impossible to ignore. In 1971, police searched Allen's home. Years later, they searched it again. They collected firearms, explosives, knives, handwriting samples, fingerprints, even DNA evidence when technology finally made such testing possible. For decades, Arthur Lee Allen remained the leading suspect in the public eye. Books were written about him. Television documentaries portrayed him as the most likely Zodiac. The 2007 film Zodiac introduced millions of viewers to the theory that Allen was the killer. Yet despite all the suspicion, the evidence never reached the standard required for a criminal conviction. His fingerprints did not conclusively match those recovered from the crime scenes. His handwriting failed to produce a definitive match. Later, DNA comparisons also failed to identify him as the sender of the Zodiac letters. Suspicion alone wasn't enough, and investigators knew it. Allen wasn't the only suspect. Over the decades, police investigated military veterans, convicted criminals, engineers, college professors, and countless ordinary citizens whose names surfaced through anonymous tips. Some resembled the composite sketch. Others lived near the crime scenes. A few had experience with ciphers or military communications. Each theory generated headlines. Each seemed convincing for a while. Thanks for watching. Then another piece of evidence would emerge, and the case would collapse once again. The biggest challenge wasn't a lack of suspects, it was a lack of certainty. The Zodiac operated across multiple jurisdictions, forcing different police departments to share evidence in an era long before modern digital databases. Critical forensic techniques were still in their infancy. Crime scenes were sometimes contaminated. Potential evidence that would be considered invaluable today was overlooked or unintentionally destroyed. As technology advanced, investigators repeatedly returned to the evidence. Fingerprints were enhanced. Ballistics were re-examined. DNA was extracted from stamps and envelopes whenever possible. Digital software reconstructed. Faded handwriting. New forensic methods gave detectives hope that science might finally succeed where decades of traditional investigation had failed. But every breakthrough seemed to raise as many questions as it answered. The Zodiac had left behind hundreds of clues, yet somehow, none of them revealed the one thing investigators wanted most: his name. More than half a century has passed since the Zodiac Killer fired his first known shots. The cars have long disappeared. The crime scenes have changed. Many of the detectives who dedicated their careers to the investigation are no longer alive. Yet the case itself refuses to fade into history. Unlike many famous serial killers, Zodiac was never caught. He was never placed on trial. He never confessed. No jury ever heard the evidence. Instead, he left behind something far more unsettling: a mystery. Over the decades, advances in forensic science have transformed criminal investigations. DNA profiling has solved murders once believed impossible to crack. Genetic genealogy has identified killers who escaped justice for more than 40 years, including the Golden State Killer. Naturally, many wondered if Zodiac would be next. Investigators revisited old evidence once again: envelopes, postage stamps, fingerprints, photographs. Every surviving piece of physical evidence was re-examined using technology that detectives in 1969 could never have imagined. Some officials have confirmed that usable DNA profiles have been developed from portions of the evidence. Others have cautioned that the available samples may be incomplete, contaminated, or may not even belong to the killer himself. Because of that uncertainty, investigators have remained careful about making public claims. The search continues quietly behind the scenes. Meanwhile, amateur investigators have never stopped looking. Entire online communities analyze every letter, every cipher, every police report, every witness statement. Thousands of people have spent years comparing military records, yearbooks, census documents, and historical maps, hoping to discover the one detail everyone else overlooked. New suspects continue to appear. New theories continue to spread. But theories are not evidence, and after decades of speculation, the one thing the case still lacks is definitive proof. Perhaps the Zodiac died years ago without ever revealing his identity. Perhaps his name already exists somewhere inside a forgotten box of evidence waiting to be rediscovered. Or perhaps the truth disappeared with him forever. What makes the Zodiac case so unforgettable isn't simply the number of victims. It is the psychological battle he created. He manipulated newspapers. He taunted police. He turned cryptography into front-page news. And he convinced an entire generation that someone could commit horrific crimes while remaining completely anonymous. In many ways, the Zodiac achieved exactly what he wanted. People are still reading his letters, still trying to solve his ciphers, still speaking his chosen name. More than 50 years later, the hunt never truly ended. It simply passed from one generation of investigators to the next. And somewhere inside thousands of pages of reports, or perhaps within a fragment of DNA too small to analyze decades ago, the answer may still exist, waiting for the moment when science, persistence, and a little luck finally come together. Until then, the Zodiac Killer remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in criminal history, and perhaps the most chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous criminal isn't the one who leaves no clues. It's the one who leaves hundreds of them, yet somehow still disappears without a trace. For decades, the Zodiac Killer has remained a ghost, a man who taunted police, mocked the FBI, and vanished without ever facing justice. But as terrifying as the Zodiac was, he wasn't the only criminal who managed to disappear. There was another killer, one who struck across multiple states, one who broke into homes while families slept, one who committed dozens of assaults and murders over nearly a decade, before vanishing without a trace. For more than 40 years, investigators believed they would never know his name, until one revolutionary breakthrough in forensic science changed everything. A single DNA sample, a family tree, and one ordinary man living a quiet suburban life. His arrest shocked the world and completely transformed modern criminal investigations. Could the same technology one day solve the Zodiac case as well? Or will Zodiac remain the one mystery that even modern science cannot unlock? In our next investigation, we'll follow the extraordinary hunt that finally captured one of America's most elusive serial killers. The hunt for the Golden State Killer. Trust me, you won't want to miss this one.